All right, College Football Nation, we are 6 weeks in. We are coming up on week 7 here. How are these teams, how are these conferences stacking up against each other halfway through the season? A lot of football left to be played, a lot of amazing football so far. This is shaping up to be one of the greatest seasons for college football, just as far as the craziness and insanity that is occurring across the board. So, in the midst of all that, has there been some shakeup to the traditional narrative of where conferences fall here and there? We're going to go through every single conference in college football, all 10 of them, from number 1 all the way through to number 10. Usually I'd reverse the trend here and go 10 through 1. But, we're just going to go 1 through 10 here. And you can hop off along the way whenever, if I call your conference and you're not interested anymore. We'll just call it however you want to. We're going to go ahead right now, though. We're going to go 1 through 10, talk about how do these conferences stack up against each other? What's their records versus Power 5? Best team for each conference. Summarize the conference overall, top 25, how many teams they have, that kind of thing. Best win for each conference. Are there teams in this conference that should be ranked or could be ranked? And then which teams in each of these conferences are dragging down the conference? Which teams are the bottom of their conference? And before I start, I just want to kind of clarify 2 points I'm going to be making. Best team doesn't necessarily mean the highest ranked team. Sometimes it will, but sometimes it'll also be the best team in that conference. Just overall best team, maybe not getting the respect or the love that they deserve, or maybe due to a loss here or there, not ranked as high as they would be otherwise. But best team overall in that conference. If you had to pick the top teams to fight at the end of the day, this is the team you'd want representing the conference. And then bottom doesn't necessarily mean the last couple teams in that conference, but which of these teams from each conference represent the bottom end of college football altogether, the bottom dwellers of college football. And so not just bottom in their conference, but bottom in college football altogether. Okay, so we're going to get right into it. First of all, number 1 conference. Now, I would say this shouldn't be a surprise, but really, there's 2 conferences in college football right now that are really butting heads, and one of them is making a real kind of resurgence here as being a top conference in college football. So it's SEC versus Big Ten. I'm going to have to go with the SEC in this one. Yes, the Big Ten has a ton of teams up there at the top in their top conference, and we'll talk about them when we get there. But the SEC just has depth overall as well as those top teams. SEC is 6-5 versus Power 5, so middle of the road there, but 6-5 versus Power 5 so far this season. Non-conference, that is, not with obviously within their conference. They're more than that, but playing out other Power 5s, they're 6-5. They have 2 teams in the top 5 right now, number 1 and number 5, and they have 7 teams in the top 25. Half of their conference out of 14 teams, 7 of them are in the top 25. Best team in the conference, gonna have to go with number 1 Georgia. It's close between Alabama and Georgia. I still think Alabama's a really good football team. I don't think that loss is going to define them. But you can't argue with the number 1 ranking and the number 1 defense in the nation. Georgia's holding all teams they've played. They've only allowed 2 offensive touchdowns, and they're allowing them to, I have it written down somewhere else in another video I did, but I think it's like 201 yards total offense, rushing and passing. Amazing job by Georgia this season. Best win? Well, not a ton of great out-of-conference games, which is typical for the SEC because they play such a tough conference within. But the win against Clemson is a good win. It's not looking as good a win as it was. They're definitely not the Trevor Lawrence year Clemson's, but it's still a pretty good win for Georgia. Who could be ranked in this conference? I definitely think Auburn could be ranked. Obviously, they were prior to the loss to Georgia last week, so I definitely think they could be ranked. So really, they could have 8. They do have 8 deserving teams in this conference, or deserving being top 25, and that's why they get the nod over the Big Ten here. The Big Ten, when you count the top-heavy section of that conference, which they're incredibly top-heavy this year, when you count the top section of that conference, they're very good. But the conference as a whole, from number 1 through number 14, does not stack up with the SEC when you start slotting them in against each other. Now, the SEC, they do have bottom dwellers, Vanderbilt and South Carolina. South Carolina had to start a graduate transfer at quarterback. Not a graduate transfer, a coach, a graduate transfer assistant. He wasn't even playing anymore, and they had to suit him up as quarterback. So they're going through some issues. And then Vanderbilt, always one of the worst, if not the worst teams in college football, right up there with Kansas and Purdue for worst team in college football. So bottom dweller here for the SEC, Vanderbilt and South Carolina. But can't argue with results and with history. SEC, even this season, even amongst all the craziness, has a little bit of stability there. in being the number one conference in college football. All right, second conference overall. All right, second here, and I already mentioned them. They're the Big Ten. They're 8-4 versus Power 5, so awesome record right there off the bat. 8-4 versus Power 5. They have one team in the top 5 in Iowa. Who would have seen that coming? But Iowa is sitting at number 2 in the nation. The Hawkeyes there, and then they have 5 teams in the top 10. That's it. They don't have any teams outside of the top 10, no of the top 25, but they have 5 teams in the top 10. Now that's 5 out of 14, but they have 5 of them in the top 10. Like I said, incredibly top heavy. You could definitely make the argument that the Big Ten is the best conference in college football this year. You definitely could. Most years you couldn't. I lived in the Midwest. I played my high school football up at Troy Christian in Ohio. I've lived in Ohio. I've dealt with Big Ten fans and their massive heads and how they think that their conference is and this was back in 2014 and 2015. I mean, Ohio State ended up winning the national championship, but the Big Ten was not the best conference in college football. Nobody was saying that except for Big Ten fans. So most years you couldn't make that argument, but this year you definitely could. Big Ten has some great teams. Iowa, Penn State, Michigan State, and Ohio State are all looking to be very good teams, high rankings. We'll have to see if that stays with the trend. Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, he's got to choke at some point. He always has in the past. We'll have to see if he's gotten them back on track. And I just don't see Michigan State ending the season undefeated either. But Big Ten right now, one of the top 10 conferences in college football. Best team, Iowa, at number 2 there. And best win, it was that win by Penn State against Auburn, even though the refs helped them out a little bit in that one. Definitely a good win by Penn State. Now, the issue, though, that keeps them out, we talk about those top-heavy teams. We start looking at the rest of the Big Ten, and that's where it really drags them down. Who could be ranked out of this conference in addition to the teams that are already ranked? Nobody. There's nobody in this conference that really could make the case for being ranked. Maybe Maryland, but not really, in addition to who's already being ranked. Bottom teams, pretty much everybody else. Rutgers, Purdue, Illinois, Northwestern, and unfortunately Nebraska, just because they choke every single game. They're playing really well. They're a good team, but they cannot finish, and that puts them the bottom dweller. I believe they're 2-4, I think, right now this season. So, yeah, bottom dwellers here are what's dragging this conference from being the elite conference in college football this season. However, I just did a video, and I'll put that in the remarks description, talking about a scenario. It was mostly focused on the SEC, asking could the SEC be out of the playoffs versus if a certain scenario happened. But I also mentioned a possibility, a way the Big Ten could get 2 teams into the conference, into the playoffs. You're definitely going to want to watch that, see my thoughts on that. I'd love to hear you Big Ten fans talk about that, and I'm sure you already think that your teams you can get 2 teams in the playoffs. Probably been thinking that since 2014. But this year, there's actually a path for that to happen. I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right. Third conference overall here is the Big 12. Now, SEC, Big 10, neck and neck elites. This is where you take a pretty significant step down. Still a good conference, but not elites. It's like looking at Georgia and Alabama versus everybody else. It's elites and then good teams, but not elites. So Big 12 here, 4-4 against Power 5. One team in the top 5 in Oklahoma, barely hanging on by a thread after almost losing every single game they've played, but still undefeated, so still the top 5. 3 total teams in the top 25. That's out of 10 teams in their conference. Best team is, now, like I said, I'm not always going to be the highest ranked. I think the best team in the Big 12 is number 12, Oklahoma State, not the other team from Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma State is the better team. They've looked better the last 3 games. Narrow victory over my team, Boise State, but then they beat Kansas State by a big margin, and they beat Baylor by another 2-score margin there too. And Oklahoma hasn't done that to anybody all season. So I think a lot of it's going to determine this week. Oklahoma State has another big matchup this week against, I forgot who they're playing. I did a top 10 games of the week preview, and I think they were in it. But Oklahoma is playing, let's see. Anyhow, Oklahoma State plays Texas. There it is. That's a big game. Yeah, they're a big matchup this week, and then Oklahoma plays TCU. So that's going to really kind of determine that rankings. I think there's a chance that Oklahoma State makes another big step forward where Oklahoma struggles, gets the win, but struggles and maybe takes another step back. So I think you could definitely see Oklahoma State being the team representing the Big 12 at the end of the year. Best win for the Big 12, probably win over Virginia Tech by West Virginia. It's a good win. They haven't played a lot of great teams outside of conference, but that's a pretty good win. Who could be ranked? Honestly, you're looking at two teams. Baylor and Iowa State could both legitimately be ranked here. Iowa State has only lost to Iowa, who's number 2 in the nation, and then I believe Baylor was the other loss. And then Baylor is a team that's 5-1 that only lost to Oklahoma State. So you could legitimately have 2, not just 3 teams in the top 25. Bottom of the conference, Kansas, as always, we've kind of already mentioned them. All right, number 4. This is going to get controversial. I'm already laying the groundwork. This is a big, I think, shocker for a lot of people. And really, honestly, I've thought that they were a top conference for a long time, but they are even exceeding my expectations. Number 4, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, Mountain West. The Mountain West is having an amazing season. Don't turn off the video. Don't turn off the video. Stay on here and hear me out on this. Hear me out. Before I finish here, I just want to say that I'm not the only one saying this. Sports Illustrated put out an article putting Mountain West as the 5th best conference. So I'm putting them at 4th, which is higher than them, but I'm only one slot off from what Sports Illustrated is saying. So I'm not the only one thinking this, and the Mountain West is proving it this season. They are 6-6 against Power 5 this year, if you count BYU as a Power 5. If you don't, then I think they're 4-5. I think 4-5 against Power 5. But if you count BYU as a Power 5, then they're 6-6. And honestly, BYU should be considered a Power 5 in the way that they've played and how they have separated themselves from the competition over the years. I've been arguing for a while that BYU should be considered a Power 5, especially with them being accepted to the Big 12 here. They should be getting considered as part of that Power 5 matchup. Anyhow, I digress. They have one team currently in the top 25, but this is where East Coast bias plays in. East Coast bias is extremely strong and incredibly difficult to fight. The first part of East Coast bias is that the East Coast teams just numerically have larger fan bases. They're in areas with higher development and larger numbers of people, so they have more clout. But the big part of East Coast bias is the fact that nobody watches Mountain West or Pac-12 games that are on at 8 or 10 p.m. If that's the kickoff time, nobody's watching those games. So nobody knows how good these teams actually are. They're not in their face. Also the fact that the Mountain West is terrible at promoting itself. But the Mountain West is a legitimate conference and a top conference in the nation this year in the way that they're playing. I usually wouldn't rate them this high, but this season they are doing an amazing job with the way that the teams that they've gone out and beaten, the way that they've done it. They have, right now, the top team in the conference is San Diego State at 24th, but I would think that Fresno State is actually the best team in the conference, almost beat, this close to beating Oregon. They do have 2 losses, but one of those is to a fellow Mountain West team in Hawaii. Overall, they're just the best team in my eyes here out of the Mountain West. Just incredible offense with their quarterback and their running back production. Jake Hayner from them is a legitimate, he's one of the top quarterbacks in the nation. He's 3rd in passing and 5th in touchdowns. If Fresno State only had 1 loss or even was undefeated, I think he could be a dark horse contender for the Heisman. But unfortunately, he's going to be out of the race altogether this year because of those 2 losses and being in the Mountain West. But Fresno State, a legitimate contender. Best win for the conference, my Boise State Broncos win over undefeated number 10 BYU. Absolutely great win last week for Boise State to reverse the fortunes of their season and move forward. But who could be ranked out of this conference? Honestly, Nevada, Fresno State, and Air Force, especially Nevada and Air Force, all deserve to be ranked. And this is not a could, but a who should be ranked. The Mountain West, if the Mountain West was geographically situated in the AAC with the records of their teams and the way they've played this year, all these teams would be in the top 25. But they're not because of East Coast bias. So Nevada, Fresno State, Air Force should be joining San Diego State. So in my mind, legitimacy, they have 4 teams in the top 25, even if technically they only have 1. And San Diego State is a team that is undefeated, 5-0, 2 wins over Power 5, including a win over Utah. And they're rated behind SMU. SMU, they're undefeated, but they only have 1 win against the Power 5, and they have played garbage schedule. And it matches up at least the same as San Diego State's as far as strength of schedule for the non-Power 5s. And I actually think it's worse than San Diego State's. But yet San Diego State, 2 Power 5 wins, slotted behind because of East Coast bias. Bottom teams, yeah, Mountain West, great conference, but still has some bottom teams. New Mexico, Colorado State, UNLV. all bottom teams in this conference. But this is a very, very good conference. And like I said, Sports Illustrated, I'm not the only one saying it, Sports Illustrated also has this conference as one of the top team over Power 5 conferences in the in college football this season. Okay, number 5. And this was close. This was way too close for comfort. I really, it was basically came down to a toss-up between these two. I think I had to go with the one that I thought had played better overall, had better depth throughout. I'm going to go with the Pac-12. Pac-12 at number 5, 3-6 so far against in non-conference Power 5 teams. One team in the top 10 in Oregon, 2 teams in the top 25. They also have Arizona State is ranked. Best team definitely Oregon. Best win against Ohio State, which is looking like a better and better win all the time. Who could be ranked? UCLA, I think, could make a legitimate contention at 4-2 for being ranked, especially with that win over LSU. But bottom of this conference, yeah, they have a lot of teams at the bottom of this conference that are that's dragging this conference down. Cal, Washington, Colorado, and Arizona. Now let's compare that against the AAC. AAC, I'm rating them as 6th, but it is neck and neck. They're basically the same ranking right here. AAC. 5-7, 0 in the top 5, 2 teams in the top 25 overall, so same as the Pac-12. And Oregon really pulls the Pac-12 up because they have a team in the top 10, whereas the AAC does not. Wake Forest and NC State are the only teams from the ACC, I'm all over the place, ACC in the top 25. Best team is going to be number 22, NC State, I think is the best team out of this conference. But this conference is garbage this year. The AAC is absolutely trash. They are not making the playoffs. There's no chance in the world, and they're lucky they have an automatic tie-in to a New Year's Six Bowl because I think there's a chance that their winner wouldn't even get to that. Now, if Wake Forest or NC State find a way to go undefeated here, we'll see what happens. Wake Forest is the only undefeated team from that conference. If Wake Forest finds a way to go undefeated here and pull off miraculous, maybe. But this is a really, I would even take a 1-loss SEC and a 1-loss Big Ten team over an undefeated AAC team at this point for the playoffs. ACC team. I keep mixing those two up. Playoffs. Best win against Missouri. Is a good win against Missouri there. Who could be ranked? You could probably make a case for Clemson being ranked 3-2 so far, but lost to Georgia there, and then a loss to NC State. So I think Clemson could be ranked. But bottom of this conference, Florida State really dragging down Miami and Duke. It's just these two conferences are so close in the estimates. AAC. The eighth. That's why I wrote it down. AAC. That's why I keep saying it. ACC and the Pac-12. They're just so close in the estimate on who could be rated here at the 5th and 6th. But I think that Oregon being in the top 10 pulls them up, and I just think the Pac-12 has performed. Middle of the pack has performed better overall versus the middle of the pack ACC. So that one's up for debate. I'm sure you can debate on end, but that's just how I see it. Also, I watch every college football game, every single one. I set up 2 television screens, a laptop with 2 to 4 games on it, my phone, and sometimes I'll have an additional monitor up, and I watch every single game. And the way that it's popped off the screen at me, Pac-12 is playing better than the ACC. Okay, now let's get to the conference I keep mixing in here. AAC is number 7th here. And they're not number 7th because they're necessarily a bad conference. 7th here, at least down here till number 8 are all pretty good conferences. And obviously the AAC has the best group of 5 team in it in Cincinnati. They have one team in the top 5. That's number 3 Cincinnati. They have 2 teams inside the top 25 with SMU, who, like I said, I think they're overranked. I don't think that they should be ranked ahead of San Diego State, but they are. So they get 2 teams inside the top 25 and 1 team in the top 5. AAC, if every team in the conference was Cincinnati, they'd be the best conference in the nation, and they'd be the best conference out of the group of 5 for sure. But they're not. Not every team is Cincinnati. The best team in this conference is Cincinnati. The best win is Cincinnati's win over Notre Dame. It's basically Cincinnati is holding up this entire conference right now. Who could be ranked? You could maybe make a case for Houston to be ranked in this. Sitting here at 5-1, but that Texas Tech win loss kind of drags them down there. Bottom of the conference, every single other team. That's why they're not jumping the Mountain West. That's why they're behind the Pac-12. That's why they're behind the AAC, ACC, even with a top 5 team in Cincinnati. Unfortunately, UCF lost their #1 quarterback, their Heisman contender, Dylan Gabriel, so they're 3-2. They have 5 teams who are less than 50%, and the other 3 are all sitting at 50% on their records. So they like to promote themselves as the P6, but they're not looking that this year. And honestly, I don't think they've looked P6 for a while. The Mountain West has been the stronger conference, but you can make no debate that the Mountain West is the top conference in the Group of 5 this year. Even if Cincinnati is the best team in the Group of 5, the rest of the conference drags them down. Okay, 8th overall, and they are 1-8 versus Power 5. I don't know if I mentioned it, but AAC is 4-8 versus Power 5. 1-8 versus Power 5. They have one top 25 team in Coastal Carolina, massively overranked, by the way, who has played nobody this season, almost lost to Buffalo. Doesn't look like the same Coastal Carolina team from last year, but they're in the top 15 because for some reason the AP voters love them. I don't know why. Best team in the conference? I think Louisiana is the best team in the conference. They played Texas tough. They've looked really good. They crushed Appalachian State last night. They've looked like a very, very good team. I would pick Louisiana. I think Louisiana is going to beat Coastal Carolina when the two of them play in their conference championship game there. So I'd say best team here is Louisiana. But best win for the conference, unfortunately, is Kansas. They just haven't beaten anybody this year. They've come close. Louisiana Tech has come close to beating off a lot, upsetting a lot of teams, but just didn't end up working out that way. So Kansas is the best win. I actually wrote XD next to it because if your best win as a conference is Kansas, that's pretty sad. Who should be ranked? UL. Louisiana should definitely be ranked right now. I think they will be after that win against Appalachian State. I think they'll jump in the top 25 this week. Bottom, every single other team except Coastal, Louisiana, Appalachian State. Appalachian State, still a good team in that conference, but every other team. Troy is playing okay, pushing up, but pretty much everybody else, bottom of the conference there. All right, MAC, and again, this and Conference USA, and obviously that's the last team conference, so I can say it right there. MAC and Conference USA were very, very close. Came down to a margin of just which team had the better middle of the level, middle tier teams in it. MAC right now, 3-14 versus Power 5, 0 teams in the top 25. Best team, Western Michigan. Best win against Pitt by Western Michigan. Pitt actually an okay team this year. Who could be ranked? Nobody. Bottom of the conference. The entire MAC East is the bottom of the conference. They have one team plus 50. I think they have a 1 win. I think it's Kent State with 1 win, but 1 win past 50. They're like 3-2. But the rest of the MAC East, they're all terrible. The MAC West though keeps this conference from being last because they have 3 teams that are 4-2 and 3 teams that are 3-3. So that helps keep their head above water. But the rest of the conference is garbage. Conference USA, always routinely the bottom tier team in the conference. They do have a great team in UTSA, and I'll get to them in a second. 2-13 versus Power 5, 0 teams top 25. Best team in the conference is UTSA, and they have a win against Illinois. Best win by UTSA there by the conference against Illinois. Who should be ranked? And it is a should, not could. UTSA should absolutely be ranked. They're 6-0. They have wins over Illinois and Memphis. I expect them to jump into the top 25 this week, and if they don't, it is an absolute travesty by the AP voters there, because UTSA, they haven't been noticed. They haven't been good in the past, but they deserve to be noticed this year. They are completely flipping the script and playing amazing football this season. Deserve to be ranked in the top 25. Bottom of the conference, as far as bottom, MTSU, FIU, Western Kentucky, ODU, Rice, University of North Texas, Southern Miss, all of those teams, bottom of the conference. They have 8 teams that are sub 50%, and only 4 teams with plus wins, and they're plus 50% there. That's what separates it from the MAC. There is just they have a greater number of garbage teams than the MAC does. All right, that concludes my look at the best conferences in college football. Thank you for listening. Let me know what you think and all the times and ways that I got wrong and why your conference is the best conference. I'd love to see. I am being a little facetious there, but I would like to see your rankings and let me know what you think. If you haven't before, make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching this video, and go Big Blue.